When gospel artists reach the top of the charts, win awards, and inspire millions with their music, it feels like they'll be there forever. But some of the most celebrated voices in Christian music walked away from everything they'd built, and their departures sent shockwaves through their communities. Some left because of personal struggles, others because they could no longer reconcile their faith with their authentic selves, and a few simply burned out from the pressure of being spiritual role models. Their stories reveal the hidden costs of gospel stardom and the courage it takes to choose honesty over expectations. Here are 12 shocking stories about gospel artists who disappeared from the spotlight forever. Jennifer Knapp vanished at her peak. In 2002, Jennifer Knapp was riding high as one of Christian music's most powerful voices. Her debut album, Kansas, had launched her to stardom in 1998, selling over 1 million copies with her raw, raspy sound that drew comparisons to the Indigo Girls. She'd earned Grammy nominations, won Dove Awards, and toured with Christian megastars like Third Day. But then she did something shocking. She completely disappeared. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. For 7 years, nobody knew where she'd gone or why one of the industry's brightest stars had simply walked away. When she finally resurfaced in 2010, the truth came out in a way that rocked the Christian music world. Knapp revealed she'd been in a same-sex relationship since 2002, essentially coming out as a lesbian to a fan base that had celebrated her spiritual lyrics. The backlash was immediate and fierce. She appeared on Larry King Live to defend her identity as a gay Christian, facing off against pastors who called her lifestyle sinful. What many didn't realize was that Knapp hadn't left music because she was gay. She'd left primarily because of theological questions she couldn't answer within evangelicalism. The brutal schedule and pressure to be perfect had drained her. When she finally allowed herself to explore her sexuality, it was after years of celibacy and internal conflict. Today, Knapp runs Inside Out Faith, an organization for LGBTQ Christians, and continues to make music on her own terms. She never apologized for being herself, even though it cost her nearly everything she'd built. Tonex's ministry imploded in real time. Anthony Charles Williams II, known as Tonex, wasn't just a gospel artist. He was a phenomenon. His 2004 double album, Out the Box, earned him Grammy nominations, 6 Stellar Awards, and the title of Artist of the Year. He fused hip-hop, rock, and traditional gospel with a Prince-like flamboyance that young Christians had never seen before. But by 2006, everything was falling apart. In a shocking radio interview, Tonex announced he was retiring from gospel music, citing the industry's fakeness and backstabbing. He claimed he was broke despite his success, abandoned by his label, freshly divorced, and spiritually exhausted. Then things got even stranger. In 2007, he released a song called The Naked Truth that featured explicit language and shocking lyrics where he addressed childhood trauma, calling out a preacher who allegedly molested him when he was 6 years old. The song included profanity and raw anger that felt miles away from his gospel roots. His label dropped him immediately, citing awkward behavior and artistic direction outside the scope of gospel music. By 2009, rumors about Tonex's sexuality had reached a boiling point. He appeared on a gospel television show and confirmed what many had suspected: he was gay. The announcement created chaos in the Christian community. Some defended him, but most turned their backs completely. Tonex rebranded as B. Slade and pivoted to secular pop music, releasing an album called Diesel that openly celebrated his identity. Today, he performs occasionally, but remains largely out of the spotlight, a cautionary tale about what happens when someone tries to be authentic in a system that demands conformity. Amy Grant's crossover divided her world. Amy Grant's story is different because she never truly disappeared, but she did lose half her fan base in the most public way possible. Known as the Queen of Christian Pop, Grant dominated the 1980s with albums like Age to Age and hit songs like El Shaddai. But in 1991, everything changed when she released Heart in Motion, a polished pop album that included the massive hit, Baby Baby. The song reached #1 on Billboard's pop chart, but the music video portrayed it as a romantic love song rather than something spiritual, even though Grant wrote it about her newborn daughter. Gospel fans were furious, accusing her of abandoning her faith for mainstream fame. The controversy deepened when she divorced her husband of 16 years, fellow Christian musician Gary Chapman, in 1999. Then she married country music star Vince Gill in 2000. Conservative Christians viewed this as the ultimate betrayal, a Christian music icon leaving her first husband and marrying outside the faith community. Radio stations pulled her songs and fans burned her albums. What they didn't see was a woman struggling under the weight of impossible expectations, trying to balance her art with the rigid moral standards imposed on her. Grant never left Christianity, but she refused to be confined by it either. She continued releasing both pop and Christian albums, performing Christmas shows with Vince Gill, and occasionally returning to her gospel roots. She won Kennedy Center honors in 2022, but the scars from her crossover era remain. Her story shows that for female Christian artists especially, any hint of sexuality or personal autonomy can be seen as spiritual failure. Ray Boltz kept his secret for 3 decades. Ray Boltz was the picture of Christian success. For over 20 years, he'd been a contemporary Christian music staple with certified gold albums, 3 Dove Awards, and 12 #1 hits, including Thank You, Watch the Lamb, and I Pledge Allegiance to the Lamb. He was married to Carol for 33 years, raised 4 kids, and seemed to embody everything evangelicals valued about family and faith. Then in September 2008, everything changed. Boltz gave an exclusive interview to the Washington Blade, a gay publication, where he announced he was gay. The revelation shocked his fanbase because Boltz had spent his entire adult life fighting these feelings through prayer, therapy, and sheer willpower. He'd tried everything to change, believing that being Christian meant these attractions would eventually disappear. They never did. In 2004, he quietly told his family the truth, and they responded with love and support, even as their world turned upside down. He and Carol divorced amicably, and Boltz moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where he could live anonymously for the first time in his life. When he finally went public, he explained that after 30 years of denying who he was, he simply couldn't take it anymore. Critics accused him of abandoning Scripture, but Boltz pushed back, saying he believed God made him this way. He began performing at gay-affirming metropolitan community churches and eventually released an album in 2010 called True that addressed his coming-out experience. Songs like Don't Tell Me Who to Love and Who Would Jesus Love reflected his journey toward self-acceptance. Boltz said he didn't want to be a spokesperson for gay Christians. He just wanted to live authentically after decades of hiding. His story highlighted the impossible position many LGBTQ Christians face: live honestly and lose your community, or stay closeted and lose yourself. DC Talk's Kevin Max deconstructed everything. DC Talk was one of the biggest Christian bands of the 90s, blending rap, rock, and pop to create anthems like Jesus Freak that defined a generation. Kevin Max was the artistic wildcard of the trio, known for his soaring vocals and eclectic style. When the band went on hiatus in 2000, each member pursued solo careers, but Max's trajectory became the most controversial. Over the years, he released experimental albums that didn't fit neatly into Christian music boxes, and he grew increasingly vocal about his frustration with evangelicalism. Then in May 2021, Max dropped a bombshell on Twitter, announcing he was an ex-evangelical. The term describes people who've left evangelical Christianity, often due to political or theological differences, and it sent his remaining Christian fans into a panic. Many assumed Max had abandoned faith entirely, but he clarified that he still followed what he called the universal Christ, though he never explained exactly what that meant. Max said he'd been deconstructing his faith for decades, questioning the rigid beliefs he'd grown up with and exploring more progressive ideas. He released a song titled Jesus, I Love You, But Your Followers. Freak Me Out that captured his disillusionment with institutional Christianity. In interviews, he described feeling trapped by the expectations of Christian fans who wanted him to stay in a narrow theological lane. He supported LGBTQ rights, Black Lives Matter, and other causes that put him at odds with conservative evangelicals. His former bandmates Toby Mac and Michael Tate remained more traditional in their faith, creating an unspoken distance between them. Max's journey shows how artists who grow and change philosophically often find themselves exiled from the communities that once celebrated them. Audrey Assad lost her faith. Publicly, Audrey Assad was a rising star in Catholic and evangelical worship music with a voice that could bring people to tears during prayer. Her 2010 debut album, The House You're Building, became Amazon's Best Music of the Year, and she toured with major artists like Chris Tomlin. But around 2013, cracks began to show. Assad started experiencing panic attacks whenever she tried to take communion, which eventually led her to trauma therapy. She began questioning everything she'd been taught about God, Scripture, and the Church's treatment of marginalized people. By 2018, she was openly talking about her faith deconstruction, describing a crisis that stemmed partly from the Church's stance on LGBTQ issues. She couldn't reconcile the loving God she believed in with a church that condemned gay people to hell. In 2021, Assad publicly announced she was no longer Christian. The statement devastated her fan base, many of whom had used her music for worship. She explained that she'd felt suffocated by the expectations placed on her as a Christian artist and exhausted by the culture wars within evangelicalism. She also revealed she'd been experiencing severe burnout for years, working constantly while struggling with anxiety and depression. After leaving Christianity, Assad explored spirituality through other avenues, including psychedelic plant medicine and nature-based practices. She still makes music, but it's no longer explicitly religious. Critics accused her of abandoning truth for cultural acceptance, but Assad insisted she was finally being honest about her doubts instead of performing spirituality for an audience. Her story exposes the toll that constant performance takes on artists who are expected to be spiritual role models while wrestling with their own questions. Marty Sampson's Instagram post exploded. Marty Sampson had spent decades as one of the most prolific songwriters for Hillsong worship, penning hits like Mighty to Save and countless other worship anthems sung in churches worldwide. In August 2019, he posted a casual Instagram message that sent shockwaves through the Christian world. He announced he was losing his faith, questioning the Bible's reliability, hell's existence, and whether Christianity was even true. The post was raw and unfiltered, reading like a journal entry rather than a public declaration. Within hours, it went viral. Christian leaders rushed to respond, with some offering prayers and support, while others accused him of never really having faith to begin with. Franklin Graham suggested that people who fall away probably weren't truly saved, which only deepened the controversy. Sampson later clarified that he wasn't completely abandoning Christianity, but was in a season of serious doubt and deconstruction. He questioned why a loving God would allow eternal suffering and why there were so many contradictions in Scripture. What troubled many was that Sampson had been inside the Christian music machine for so long, writing songs that millions sang in worship services. If someone that close to the heart of the movement could doubt, what did that say about the rest of them? Sampson eventually stepped back from public ministry and has kept a relatively low profile since, occasionally posting about his ongoing spiritual journey. His story became a lightning rod in discussions about authenticity in Christian music. Can artists express doubt without being condemned? Or must they project unwavering certainty to keep their platform? Michael Gungor chose honesty over comfort. Michael and Lisa Gungor were darlings of the worship music world, creating beautiful, innovative songs through their band, Gungor. Their music blended folk, rock, and world influences with deeply spiritual lyrics that resonated with progressive Christians seeking something beyond traditional worship. But their faith began unraveling after a series of personal tragedies. Lisa visited Auschwitz and witnessed the horrors of the Holocaust, which shook her belief in a God who would allow such suffering. Then a cousin's partial healing from cancer and the birth of their daughter with Down syndrome in 2014 further challenged their theological framework. By 2015, Michael started publicly questioning literal interpretations of the Bible, including the Genesis creation story and Noah's flood. Conservative Christians labeled him a heretic, and the backlash was swift and brutal. Churches canceled concert dates, and Christian radio stations pulled their music. Instead of backing down, the Gungors doubled down on their questions. They stopped identifying with institutional Christianity and began exploring what they called a generic spirituality that didn't fit neatly into any religious box. In 2006, they parted ways with Integrity Music because they no longer wanted to be associated with gospel music. Their journey became emblematic of a growing movement of Christians deconstructing their faith in public, using social media and podcasts to process their doubts openly. Critics saw this as dangerous to younger believers, while supporters praised them for their honesty. Today, Michael hosts retreats and events focused on mysticism and spirituality outside traditional Christian frameworks, while still acknowledging the influence of Jesus in his journey. Hawk Nelson's John Steingard stopped believing. John Steingard spent 2 decades as the frontman for Hawk Nelson, a Canadian rock band that was a staple of Christian music festivals and youth group playlists. They had hits, toured constantly, and built a loyal following among young evangelicals. But in May 2020, Steingard shocked everyone with an Instagram post where he announced he no longer believed in God. The message was heartfelt and vulnerable, explaining that he'd been wrestling with doubts for years, but felt trapped by his role as a Christian artist. He questioned the existence of God, the reliability of the Bible, and whether faith was just wishful thinking. The response was massive and immediate. Some fans felt betrayed, saying his music had helped them through dark times and now felt tainted. Others thanked him for his honesty, admitting they'd been struggling with similar doubts in silence. Steingard clarified that he wasn't angry at Christianity and didn't regret his years making faith-based music. He just couldn't keep pretending to believe something he didn't. Hawk Nelson essentially disbanded after his announcement, though they never officially broke up. Steingard pivoted to session work and producing, building a career outside the Christian music bubble. His departure sparked intense debates about authenticity in Christian art. Should artists be required to maintain their faith to keep making Christian music? What happens to their catalog when they leave? Steingard's story became yet another example of high-profile Christians walking away, contributing to a broader cultural conversation about deconstruction and the pressures of performing spirituality. William Matthews left Bethel's machine. William Matthews was a prominent worship leader and recording artist for Bethel Music, one of the most influential worship movements in modern Christianity. Raised in a Black Church of God context, he found his home in the prophetic, spontaneous worship style championed by movements like the International House of Prayer. For years, he led worship at major conferences and recorded albums that shaped how thousands of churches approached worship. But by 2015, Matthews began questioning the theology he'd been teaching. He encountered nonviolent Christian theology and started seeing God differently than the punitive, judgmental figure he'd been raised with. He also grew uncomfortable with the rigid homogeneity of the Christian music industry and the political allegiances expected of him. As someone who'd spent evenings watching Fox News and felt at home in conservative, charismatic circles, the shift was jarring. He began questioning hell's existence, the church's treatment of LGBTQ people, and the way Christian leaders wielded Scripture as a weapon. Eventually, Matthews walked away from Bethel and the larger Christian music industry, seeking a more inclusive, justice-oriented faith. His departure was quieter than some others, without dramatic announcements or viral posts, but it represented the same struggle. How do you stay in a system that no longer reflects your values? Matthews has continued making music and leading worship, but in progressive Christian spaces that welcome questions and doubt. His story highlights how even those at the center of influential worship movements can feel stifled by theological rigidity. Jemima Thiongo went silent in Kenya. Jemima Thiongo was once a household name in Kenya's gospel music scene during the early 2000s. Her hits like Akisema Atakubariki, Pendola Ajabu, and Alinitua dominated local airwaves, playing in matatus, barbershops, and churches across the country. She won the Groove Awards for Songwriter of the Year and established herself as one of the pioneer artists who shaped Kenya's gospel industry. But then she gradually faded from the public eye, leaving fans wondering what happened to the voice that had once been everywhere. Reports suggest she retreated to preaching in churches, mentoring upcoming artists, and doing charity work. Unlike some Western artists who made dramatic public exits, Thiongo's departure was quieter and more gradual. The demands of the music industry, combined with personal reasons that were never fully disclosed, led her to step back from recording and touring. Some speculated about burnout, while others wondered if she'd faced pressure or criticism from within the religious community. The gospel music landscape in Kenya has always been intertwined with church politics and moral scrutiny, making it difficult for artists to maintain both their careers and their privacy. Thiongo's silence became symbolic of how many gospel artists, especially women, disappear not because they lose faith, but because the industry's demands become unsustainable. Today, the 51-year-old remains mostly out of the spotlight, remembered fondly by those who grew up with her music, but absent from the current generation's playlists. Jimmy Gate became a meme and vanished. Jimmy Gate was a multiple award-winning Kenyan gospel artist whose unique song titles made him a cultural icon. His music blessed the airwaves with hits that resonated across the country, establishing him as one of Kenya's top gospel musicians. But his very success became his downfall in the most unexpected way. Members of the public began cyberbullying him relentlessly, turning his song titles into jokes whenever new slang emerged online. What started as harmless teasing escalated into a pattern where Gates' name would trend on social media for all the wrong reasons, not because of his ministry or music, but because people were making fun of him. The constant ridicule took its toll, and Gate gradually withdrew from the public eye. He didn't make a dramatic announcement or stage a comeback tour. He simply faded away, maintaining a low profile while continuing to mentor upcoming artists through various initiatives. His story illustrates a modern hazard of gospel stardom in the social media age. The moment you become a meme, it's nearly impossible to reclaim your narrative. The work that took years to build can be reduced to a punchline overnight. Gates' experience also highlights the cruelty that can exist within Christian communities, where fellow believers participate in tearing down the very artists they once celebrated. Today, Gates' music still holds a special place in the hearts of those who knew him before the internet turned on him, but his active career in gospel music is essentially over. The Kirk Franklin Paradox. Kirk Franklin is still active in gospel music, but his journey deserves mention because it reveals the compromises artists make to survive in the industry. Between 1993 and 2005, Franklin released 8 albums, and all but 2 achieved platinum status. He became the face of contemporary gospel, fusing hip-hop, R&B, and traditional choir sounds in a way that appealed to younger audiences. But when he released an album in 2000 focused on racial unity called One Nation Crew, sales plummeted to just over 300,000 copies, a fraction of his usual numbers. The album that followed returned him to platinum status, revealing an uncomfortable truth about the gospel music industry. Research by musicologist Corey Hunter suggests that Black gospel artists face barriers when they try to reach white audiences, even when they tailor their music specifically to cross racial lines. Franklin's experience showed that the market for racial reconciliation in gospel music was far smaller than the appetite for feel-good spirituality. He learned to navigate these waters carefully, continuing to produce groundbreaking music while avoiding topics that might alienate his audience. His story isn't about disappearing, but about the invisible pressures that force gospel artists to self-censor and perform within acceptable boundaries. Franklin's success came at the cost of constantly managing expectations, proving that even those who stay in the spotlight pay a price for longevity in an industry that demands both authenticity and conformity.